The stage rattled into Las Lunas, New Mexico, on a blistering August afternoon in 1878, carrying a young woman whose wedding dress was still packed in her traveling trunk and whose groom was already 6 feet underground. Amelia Turner stepped down from the dusty coach with trembling legs, her dark blue traveling suit clinging to her skin in the oppressive heat. She clutched a carpetbag in one hand and a letter in the other. The ink faded from how many times she had read and reread the impossible words. Thomas Randall, the man she had agreed to marry through correspondence over the past year, had been killed in a ranching accident 3 weeks before her arrival. The letter had been written by his younger brother, explaining the tragedy and offering to purchase her return ticket to Boston. But Amelia had sold everything she owned to make this journey. Her parents were dead, her only sister married to a cruel man who made it clear there was no room for Amelia in their household. She had 23 years behind her, and nothing ahead but this dusty town, and the slim hope that somehow she could make a life here despite the catastrophe that had befallen her plans. "Miss Turner," a deep voice cut through her racing thoughts. Amelia looked up and found herself staring at the most striking man she had ever seen. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders that strained against his worn cotton shirt. His hair was dark brown, almost black, falling to his collar beneath a battered hat. But it was his eyes that arrested her, pale green like new grass in spring, filled with a sorrow that seemed to mirror her own. "I am Samuel Randall," he said, removing his hat to reveal more of his sun-bronzed face. "Thomas's brother. I wrote you the letter, Mr. Randall." Amelia's voice came out steadier than she felt. "I received your letter only 3 days before I was scheduled to depart. There was no time to respond." Samuel nodded slowly, his eyes searching her face. "I figured as much when the stage line office in Santa Fe sent word you were coming after all. I am deeply sorry for your loss, Miss Turner. Thomas was a good man. He spoke of you often in his letters, looked forward to your arrival with more joy than I had seen in him in years." The kindness in his voice threatened to undo her composure entirely. Amelia blinked hard against the sting of tears. "I wish I could have known him beyond words on paper." "Let me collect your trunk," Samuel said gently. "I have arranged a room for you at the boarding house. Mrs. Henderson runs a respectable establishment. You can rest there while we determine what is best to be done. Mr. Randall, I must be honest with you." Amelia lifted her chin, forcing herself to meet his gaze directly. "I have very little money left. Enough perhaps for a week at a boarding house, but not enough for passage back east, and truthfully, I have nothing to return to. I came west to start a new life, and despite this terrible tragedy, I still need that new life." Something shifted in Samuel's expression. "Respect, perhaps, or understanding. Then we will find a way forward," he said simply. "Thomas would have wanted you taken care of. That is the least I can do to honor his memory." The boarding house was a whitewashed adobe structure with a covered porch that provided blessed shade. Mrs. Henderson proved to be a plump, motherly woman in her 50s who clucked sympathetically over Amelia's situation and showed her to a small but clean room on the 2nd floor. Samuel carried her trunk upstairs himself, his boots heavy on the wooden steps. "I will call on you tomorrow morning," he said from the doorway. "We can discuss your options then. For now, please rest. The journey from Santa Fe is not an easy one." After he left, Amelia sank onto the narrow bed and finally allowed herself to cry. She wept for Thomas Randall, a man she had never met but whose letters had been so kind and hopeful. She wept for the life she had imagined, the security and partnership she had dreamed of during the long journey west. And she wept for herself, for the fear and uncertainty that now consumed her. But Amelia had not survived 23 years, the death of both parents and the dissolution of her childhood home by surrendering to despair. She allowed herself 1 hour of tears, then washed her face in the basin, unpacked her few belongings, and went downstairs to see about earning her keep. Mrs. Henderson was in the kitchen, preparing supper for her boarders. When Amelia offered to help in exchange for reduced room rates, the older woman accepted immediately, clearly pleased to have an extra pair of hands. That evening, Amelia served dinner to 6 other boarders, all men who worked in various capacities around Las Lunas. They were polite enough, though their eyes lingered on her with speculation that made her acutely aware of her precarious position. An unmarried woman alone in a western town was an oddity, subject to gossip and assumptions she could not afford. Sleep came fitfully that night. Amelia lay in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of this strange new place, wondering what tomorrow would bring. Samuel arrived at 9 the next morning, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt. Mrs. Henderson showed him to the small parlor where Amelia waited, her hands folded in her lap to hide their trembling. "Miss Turner," he began, then paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "I spent considerable time last night thinking about your situation. The truth is, Las Lunas is not a large town. There are limited opportunities for employment, particularly for a woman alone. You could perhaps work as a seamstress or a laundress, but the pay would be minimal, barely enough to keep you fed and housed." Amelia's heart sank, but she kept her expression calm. "I see. However," Samuel continued, his green eyes steady on hers, "there is another possibility, though I hardly know how to suggest it without causing offense. Please speak plainly, Mr. Randall. I am not in a position to stand on ceremony." He took a deep breath. "Thomas sent for you to be his wife. He made arrangements, planned a life that included you. The ranch he built, the home he prepared, it was all intended to be yours as much as his. In dying, he left behind not just land and cattle, but a responsibility to you, a debt of honor, if you will. I do not understand what you are proposing." Samuel stood and walked to the window, his back to her. The morning light silhouetted his tall frame. "I am proposing that I fulfill my brother's promise, that you marry me instead and take the place that was meant to be yours at the Randall Ranch. You would have security, a home, a name that would protect you from speculation and hardship, and I would have the satisfaction of knowing I honored my brother's commitments." The room seemed to tilt around Amelia. "You want to marry me? A woman you do not know, out of obligation to your deceased brother. I want to do right by you." Samuel turned to face her, his expression earnest. "I know this is not the romantic proposal you might have hoped for, but I am offering you a real solution, Miss Turner. A way forward that gives you safety and stability. As my wife, you would want for nothing. The ranch is prosperous, the house is sound, and I promise you would be treated with respect and kindness." Amelia rose from her chair, her mind racing. This was madness, surely. To marry one stranger instead of another, to bind herself to a man she had known for less than 24 hours. And yet, what choice did she truly have? Samuel was right about the limited options available to her. She could struggle in poverty, always vulnerable, always one disaster away from complete destitution. Or she could accept this extraordinary offer and have the security she had traveled 2,000 miles to find. "What would you expect from such a marriage?" she asked carefully. Samuel met her gaze without flinching. "I would expect you to manage the household as any rancher's wife would, to be a partner in building the ranch into something Thomas would have been proud of. As for other expectations—" He paused, a faint color rising in his tan cheeks. "I would not force my attentions on you, Miss Turner. We would have separate rooms. If in time you wished for a true marriage in all its aspects, that would be your choice to make. I seek a wife, not a servant or a woman to be used against her will." The sincerity in his voice convinced her more than any flowery words could have. Amelia had grown up watching the marriages around her, knew that many women endured far worse than a union based on practicality rather than passion. At least, Samuel was offering her dignity and choice. "I would need time," she said slowly. "Time to know you, to understand what life on a ranch would entail. I have lived my entire life in cities, Mr. Randall. I know nothing of cattle or horses or the skills required to run a frontier household." "Of course." Relief flickered across his face. "Stay here at the boarding house for the next 2 weeks. I will call on you daily and you can ask me whatever questions you wish. I will take you out to see the ranch, show you what would be your home. And then, if you still wish to accept my proposal, we can be married by the end of the month." Amelia extended her hand. "That seems fair, Mr. Randall." Samuel took her hand gently, his palm warm and calloused against hers. "Please call me Samuel. If we are to be married, there should be less formality between us." "Then you must call me Amelia." His lips curved into a small smile, the first she had seen from him. It transformed his face, softening the hard lines carved by sun and labor. "Amelia," he said, and her name sounded different in his deep voice, almost musical. Over the next 2 weeks, Samuel proved to be a man of his word. He arrived each morning and spent hours with Amelia, sometimes sitting in Mrs. Henderson's parlor answering her questions, other times taking her for walks through the town or short rides in his wagon. He told her about Thomas, about how they had come west together 5 years ago after their parents died of fever in Missouri, how they had worked as hired hands until they saved enough to buy land and start their own operation, how Thomas had been the dreamer, always planning for the future, while Samuel was the practical one who made those dreams reality. "He started writing to you 2 years ago," Samuel said one afternoon as they sat on a bench in the small town plaza. "Placed an advertisement in a Boston newspaper for a wife. He received dozens of responses, but yours was the one he kept returning to. He said you wrote with honesty and intelligence, that you did not try to present yourself as something you were not." "I told him the truth," Amelia replied, watching a group of children play in the dusty square. "That I was poor, that I had no dowry or connections, that I could offer only my willingness to work hard and be a faithful partner." I thought surely that would discourage him, but instead he wrote back immediately saying those were exactly the qualities he valued most. "That sounds like Thomas." Samuel's voice was thick with emotion. He had no patience for pretense. He wanted someone real, someone who would share the struggles as well as the successes. Amelia turned to look at Samuel's profile, at the strong line of his jaw and the sadness that seemed permanently etched around his eyes. "You miss him terribly." "Every day. He was not just my brother but my closest friend. We did everything together from the time we were boys. Coming back to the ranch each night and not hearing his voice, not being able to share the day's events with him, it is like living with a constant ache." Without thinking, Amelia reached over and placed her hand on Samuel's arm. "I am sorry I never had the chance to know him. From everything you have told me, he sounds like he was a remarkable person." Samuel looked down at her hand on his sleeve, then up at her face. Something passed between them in that moment, a connection that was more than just shared grief. Amelia felt her breath catch, suddenly aware of how close they were sitting, how the late afternoon sun brought out flecks of gold in his green eyes. "He would have liked you very much," Samuel said softly. "And he would have wanted you to be happy, Amelia. I hope you know that whatever you decide about my proposal, I will do everything in my power to ensure you are taken care of." "I know," Amelia replied, meaning it. In just 2 weeks, she had come to trust Samuel Randall in a way she had never expected. He was unfailingly gentle and respectful, patient with her endless questions about ranch life, and generous with both his time and his resources. Mrs. Henderson had tried to refuse payment for Amelia's room and board, revealing that Samuel had already settled her account for an entire month. When Amelia confronted him about it, he had simply said it was the least he could do, given the circumstances. On the Sunday of her second week in Las Lunas, Samuel took her to see the ranch. They left town in his wagon just after dawn, when the air was still relatively cool and the sky was painted in shades of pink and orange. The road wound through scrubland dotted with juniper and piñon pine, gradually climbing into hills that offered stunning views of the valley below. "The ranch is about 8 miles from town," Samuel explained as he guided the horses along the rutted track. "Far enough for privacy and good grazing land, close enough that we can reach town when needed for supplies or social occasions." Social occasions? Amelia raised an eyebrow. I had not imagined ranch life included much socializing. Las Lunas is a small community. People rely on each other out here. There are barn dances a few times a year, church socials, quilting bees for the women. It is not Boston society, certainly, but neither is it complete isolation. They crested a rise and Samuel pulled the horses to a stop. "There," he said, pointing ahead. The Randall Ranch. Amelia caught her breath. Spread out before them was a valley of golden grassland, cut through by a ribbon of cottonwood trees that marked the path of a creek. In the center stood a house built of adobe and rough-cut timber, larger than she had expected, with a wide porch facing the morning sun. Behind it were several outbuildings, including a substantial barn and a series of corrals where she could see cattle grazing. "It is beautiful," she breathed. Samuel's face lit with pride. "Thomas and I built the house ourselves over the course of 2 years. It has 4 bedrooms, a real kitchen with a cast iron stove we had shipped from Denver, and a parlor with windows facing the mountains. Thomas insisted on the extra bedrooms, saying we would both have families someday and would need the space." As they drove down into the valley, Amelia tried to imagine herself living here, waking each morning to this vast landscape, so different from the narrow streets and crowded buildings of her Boston neighborhood. It was intimidating, certainly, but also thrilling in a way she had not anticipated. The house was even more impressive up close. Samuel helped her down from the wagon and led her up onto the porch, where 2 chairs sat positioned to catch the evening breeze. Inside, the rooms were simply furnished but comfortable, with real glass windows and whitewashed walls that kept the interior cool despite the summer heat. "Thomas's room was here," Samuel said, opening a door off the main hallway. "I have left it as it was, but if you accept my proposal, this would be your room. It is the largest, with the best light." Amelia stepped inside and found herself in a spacious chamber with a large bed frame, a wardrobe, and a dresser. The walls were bare, waiting for a woman's touch. She walked to the window and looked out over the land, trying to imagine sleeping here, living here, making this place her own. "Where is your room?" she asked, across the hall. Samuel gestured to another door. "And there are 2 more bedrooms at the back of the house, intended for children eventually." Children. The word hung in the air between them. Amelia had always wanted children, had included that hope in her letters to Thomas. But that had been in the context of a normal marriage, one that would presumably include the intimacy necessary to create a family. Samuel's offer was different, predicated on restraint and respect for her autonomy. Could she truly have children under such circumstances? And more troubling, did she even want to? With a man she barely knew, as if reading her thoughts, Samuel said quietly, "I know my proposal is unconventional, but I want you to understand, Amelia, that if you marry me, it would be a real marriage in the eyes of God and the law. I would be your husband in every way that matters. And if someday you wished for children, for a complete union, I would welcome that. I would never take what was not freely given, but neither would I withhold affection if you desired it." The frank speech brought heat to Amelia's cheeks, but she appreciated his honesty. "You are offering me a great deal, Samuel. A home, security, the possibility of a family. What do you gain from this arrangement? Surely there are other women in Las Lunas or Santa Fe who would be pleased to marry you, women you could court properly and perhaps even love." Samuel was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at his land. When he spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. "The morning Thomas died, we had argued. He wanted to buy more cattle, expand the herd faster than I thought was wise. I said things I regret now, implied he was reckless and foolish. He rode out angry, and that anger made him careless. He tried to rope a steer that was too wild, too dangerous. The horse spooked through him and he struck his head on a rock. By the time I found him, he was already gone." "Oh, Samuel." Amelia moved closer, her heart aching for his pain. "I cannot bring him back," Samuel continued, his jaw tight. "I cannot unsay those last harsh words. But I can honor the life he was building, the future he wanted. You were part of that future, Amelia. By marrying you, by giving you the home and security Thomas promised, I can make right the wrong of how we parted. Does that make sense?" "Yes," Amelia said softly. "It makes perfect sense. And I do not think you have anything to atone for, Samuel. Arguments between brothers are natural. Thomas would not have blamed you for his death." "Perhaps not, but I blame myself." Samuel turned to face her fully. "So I ask you again, Amelia Turner, will you marry me? Will you let me give you the life my brother wanted you to have?" Amelia looked into his green eyes and saw not just grief and guilt, but also strength and kindness, and a fundamental decency that she knew was rare. This was not the romantic love match she had once dreamed of as a girl. But it was something potentially better, a partnership built on honesty and mutual respect, with the possibility of deeper feelings growing over time. "Yes," she said, "I will marry you, Samuel Randall." The relief that washed over his face was almost palpable. He took her hand in both of his, holding it carefully as if it were something precious. "Thank you. I promise you will not regret this decision. I will do everything in my power to be a good husband to you. And I will do my best to be a worthy wife," Amelia replied. "Though I confess I know very little about running a ranch household, you will need to be patient with my learning." "We have time," Samuel assured her. "And you are not alone in this. Maria Rodriguez comes up from town twice a week to help with the heavy cleaning and laundry. She is a good woman who can teach you what you need to know about cooking on a wood stove and managing household supplies out here. And I am always willing to answer questions." They spent the rest of the day at the ranch, with Samuel showing her around the property, introducing her to the 3 ranch hands who worked for him, and explaining the basics of cattle ranching. It was overwhelming, so much information to absorb, but Amelia found herself genuinely interested. There was something appealing about the self-sufficiency of ranch life, the way everything fit together into a complete system of survival and prosperity. As the sun began its descent toward the mountains, they drove back to Las Lunas. The conversation flowed easily between them now, some barrier having been crossed with her acceptance of his proposal. Samuel told her stories about growing up in Missouri, about his and Thomas's childhood adventures and the dreams that had brought them west. Amelia shared her own history, the happiness of her early years before her father's business failed and her mother's health declined, the difficult years that followed living with her sister and brother-in-law. "You have known hardship," Samuel observed. "That will serve you well out here. Ranch life is not easy, even in the best of times. There are droughts and harsh winters, cattle diseases and predators, 100 things that can go wrong. But there is also tremendous satisfaction in building something with your own hands, in living close to the land and the rhythms of nature." "I look forward to learning those rhythms," Amelia said, surprised to realize she meant it. They were married 3 days later in a simple ceremony at the small Catholic church in Las Lunas. Mrs. Henderson stood as witness, along with Samuel's ranch foreman, a grizzled man named Pete Watson, who had worked for the Randall brothers since they first bought the land. The priest was an elderly man with kind eyes who seemed to understand the unusual circumstances of their union, and blessed it with genuine warmth. Amelia wore her best dress, a modest green cotton that brought out the color of her eyes. Samuel had bought her a bouquet of wildflowers from a Mexican woman in the plaza, and their sweet scent filled her senses as she stood beside him and repeated her vows. His voice was steady as he promised to love and cherish her, and when he slipped a simple gold band onto her finger, his hands were gentle. There was no wedding breakfast or celebration, just a quiet meal at the boarding house with Mrs. Henderson and Pete before Samuel helped Amelia into the wagon for the journey to her new home. As Las Lunas disappeared behind them, Amelia felt a strange mixture of terror and excitement. She was married now, bound to a man she barely knew, heading toward a life completely foreign to everything she had experienced before. "Are you frightened?" Samuel asked, glancing at her. "A little," Amelia admitted, "but also hopeful." "Is that strange?" "Not at all. I feel much the same." He reached over and took her hand, his thumb brushing over the unfamiliar weight of her wedding ring. "We will make this work, Amelia. I promise you that." The house felt different this time, knowing it was now her home. Samuel carried her few belongings to the room that was now hers, setting her trunk at the foot of the bed. He lingered in the doorway, suddenly awkward. "I will let you settle in," he said. "Take your time unpacking and arranging things however you like. This is your space. I will not intrude without invitation." "Thank you, Samuel." Amelia wanted to say more, to somehow express her gratitude for his consideration, but the words would not come. After he left, closing the door softly behind him, Amelia sat on the edge of the bed and tried to comprehend the magnitude of what had just happened. 24 hours ago she had been Amelia Turner, penniless and uncertain. Now she was Amelia Randall, wife to a prosperous rancher, mistress of this house and land. It seemed impossible, like a dream she might wake from at any moment. But the ring on her finger was real, and the sounds of Samuel moving about the house were real, and gradually Amelia rose and began to unpack her belongings, making the first small steps toward claiming this new life. Dinner that first evening was a slightly awkward affair. Maria Rodriguez had left a pot of stew warming on the stove, along with fresh bread and a note of congratulations on their marriage. They ate at the kitchen table rather than the more formal dining room, the intimate setting somehow making conversation more difficult than when they had been courting. "I typically rise at dawn," Samuel said, breaking a long silence. "The cattle need to be checked, and there is always work to be done around the ranch, but you need not wake so early if you prefer to sleep later." "I am accustomed to early rising," Amelia replied. "In Boston, I worked for a seamstress who expected her assistants in the shop by 6 each morning, and I would like to learn your routines so that I can help rather than hinder." "I would not expect you to work with the cattle," Samuel protested. That is rough labor, not suitable for a lady. Perhaps, but there must be aspects of ranch management where I could be useful. I can keep accounts if you like. I have a good head for figures, and I am willing to learn whatever skills are needed to run the household efficiently. Something like admiration flickered in Samuel's eyes. Thomas chose well when he selected you from all those responses. You have a practical nature that suits this life. I hope so, Amelia said. I confess I am nervous about disappointing you. You could not possibly disappoint me. Samuel's voice was firm. You agreed to marry a stranger and move to an isolated ranch far from everything familiar. That takes remarkable courage, Amelia. I am honored to have you as my wife. The sincerity in his words warmed her more than the stew. They finished their meal in more comfortable silence, and afterward Samuel showed her how to bank the stove for the night and check that all the doors and windows were secured. These small domestic rituals felt strange and intimate, like playing at being married without the emotional foundation that should have come first. I will bid you good night, then, Samuel said when they stood in the hallway between their rooms. If you need anything at all, do not hesitate to call for me. Good night, Samuel, and thank you for everything. He nodded and retreated to his room, closing the door with a definitive click. Amelia entered her own chamber and leaned against the door, her heart pounding. She was married. This was her wedding night, and yet she was alone as she would have been as a spinster, protected by her husband's promise but also isolated by it. She changed into her nightgown and climbed into the large bed, the sheets smelling of sage and fresh air. Despite her exhaustion from the emotional intensity of the day, sleep eluded her. She lay in the darkness, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch at night, the distant lowing of cattle and the whisper of wind through the cottonwoods. At some point, she must have dozed, because she woke to sunlight streaming through her window and the smell of coffee drifting from the kitchen. Amelia dressed quickly and hurried out to find Samuel already gone, a note on the table explaining he was out checking fence lines but would return by midday. He had left the coffee warming for her, along with bread and butter for her breakfast. The consideration touched her. Amelia poured herself coffee and took it out onto the porch, settling into one of the chairs to watch the morning unfold over the ranch. The beauty of the landscape struck her anew, the way the light gilded the golden grass and turned the mountains in the distance purple and blue. She could understand why Thomas and Samuel had chosen this place, why they had worked so hard to make it theirs. Maria Rodriguez arrived mid-morning, a plump woman with kind eyes and work-roughened hands. She spoke little English, but her friendly manner transcended language barriers. Through a combination of gestures and single words, she showed Amelia how to build up the fire in the stove, how to manage the oven temperature for baking, and where everything was kept in the kitchen and pantry. "Señor Samuel, he is good man," Maria said carefully in heavily accented English. "You are fortunate, Señora." "I know," Amelia replied. "I am very fortunate." By the time Samuel returned, Amelia had helped Maria prepare a substantial lunch and had gained at least a basic understanding of the kitchen's organization. Samuel's face showed surprise and pleasure when he entered to find the table set and food ready. "You did not need to go to such trouble," he said. "It was no trouble. Maria did most of the work, but I learned a great deal watching her. I may actually be able to produce an edible meal soon." Over the following weeks, Amelia settled into the rhythms of ranch life. She rose with the sun, helped prepare breakfast, and spent her days learning the countless skills required to run a frontier household. Maria proved to be a patient teacher, and gradually Amelia mastered the art of cooking on a wood stove, preserving food for the winter, and managing the endless cycle of cleaning and mending required to maintain the household. Samuel remained unfailingly courteous and respectful, maintaining the boundaries he had promised. But as they spent their evenings together, talking over dinner or sitting on the porch as the sun set, Amelia found herself drawn to him in ways she had not anticipated. He was not just honorable and kind, but also intelligent and surprisingly well-read. In the evenings, he often read aloud to her from books Thomas had collected, his deep voice bringing the words to life. Thomas was the reader, Samuel explained one night when Amelia commented on the extensive library. He believed education was important even for ranchers. He would have wanted his children to have access to books and learning. "What about you?" Amelia asked. "What do you want for your children?" Samuel looked at her over the top of his book, his green eyes thoughtful. "I want them to be happy, to love this land but not be trapped by it, to have choices that Thomas and I never had." The mention of children created a familiar tension between them. Nearly 6 weeks had passed since their wedding. 6 weeks of sharing a home but not a bed, of growing friendship but maintained distance. Amelia found herself increasingly aware of Samuel's physical presence. The way his shirt stretched across his shoulders when he worked, the sound of his laughter when something amused him, the gentle touch of his hand when he helped her over rough ground. She thought he might be feeling the same growing attraction. She caught him watching her sometimes with an intensity that made her breath quicken, saw the way his eyes lingered on her when he thought she was not looking. But true to his word, he made no move to bridge the gap between them, waiting for her to indicate she was ready for more than their current arrangement. The decision came to Amelia on a cool September evening. They had spent the day in town, purchasing supplies and attending a church social where Amelia met more of the community. The women had welcomed her warmly, pleased to have another educated woman among them, and several had asked pointed questions about when they might expect to hear news of a baby. The questions had flustered Amelia, but they had also forced her to confront what she truly wanted. She was married to a good man, one she had come to respect and trust deeply. More than that, she was developing genuine affection for Samuel, feelings that went beyond gratitude or friendship. Why should she deny herself, deny both of them, the possibility of a real marriage? That night, after they finished dinner and Samuel began his usual retreat to his room, Amelia gathered her courage. "Samuel, wait." He turned, concern flickering across his face. "Is something wrong?" "No, nothing is wrong. I just wanted to talk to you about something." Amelia twisted her hands together, then forced them still. "These past weeks have been wonderful. You have been everything you promised and more. I feel safe here, content, and I hope you feel that I am beginning to contribute meaningfully to the ranch." "You have exceeded every expectation," Samuel said warmly. "This house feels like a home now, in a way it never did when it was just Thomas and me living like bachelors. I am glad. And I want you to know that I am happy, Samuel, truly happy." Amelia took a deep breath. "Which is why I have been thinking about our arrangement, about the boundaries we established when we married." Samuel went very still. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I would like those boundaries to change, if you are willing." The words came out in a rush. "I would like us to have a real marriage, Samuel, in every sense of the word." For a moment, he simply stared at her, as if unable to believe what he was hearing. Then he crossed the space between them in 3 long strides and took her hands in his. "Are you certain?" His voice was rough. "I do not want you to feel obligated, Amelia. What we have now is good. I am content with it if you are." "I am certain," Amelia said, meeting his gaze steadily. "I have had time to know you, to trust you. And what I feel for you now is more than just trust or friendship. I care for you, Samuel. I want to be your wife in truth." The joy that blazed in his face was answer enough. Samuel lifted her hands to his lips and kissed them gently. "I have been hoping you might come to feel this way. I have wanted you since the first day I met you at the stage, though I knew I had no right to such feelings. You came here for Thomas, not for me." "I came here seeking a life," Amelia corrected, "and I have found one with you. That is all that matters now." Samuel drew her close, his arms encircling her waist with careful tenderness. "May I kiss you, please?" Amelia whispered. His lips met hers softly at first, a gentle exploration that gradually deepened as she responded. Amelia had been kissed before, clumsy attempts by unsuitable suitors in Boston, but nothing had prepared her for the rush of sensation that flooded through her at Samuel's touch. He kissed her as if she were precious, as if he had all the time in the world to learn the taste and texture of her mouth. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Samuel rested his forehead against hers. "I want to do this right," he said. "Court you properly, even though we are already married." Amelia laughed breathlessly. "I think we have been courting all along. But I would not object to more time if you feel we need it." "Not for my sake," Samuel assured her, "but I want you to be completely certain, with no doubts or regrets." Over the next week, Samuel did indeed court her, bringing her wildflowers from the meadow, taking her on long rides across the ranch to show her his favorite places, stealing kisses that left her dizzy and wanting more. The anticipation built between them like a gathering storm, electric and inevitable. Finally, on a Saturday evening when they had the house to themselves with no work planned for the next day, Amelia went to Samuel's room instead of her own. He was sitting on his bed, pulling off his boots, and looked up in surprise when she entered. "Amelia, I am tired of separate rooms," she said simply. "Tonight I want to sleep beside my husband." Samuel stood slowly, his eyes dark with desire but also with love. That was the moment Amelia realized what she had been afraid to acknowledge even to herself. She loved him. Somewhere in the past 2 months, Samuel Randall had become essential to her happiness, the center around which her new life revolved. "I love you," she said, the words spilling out. "I know this is not how either of us expected things to happen, but I love you, Samuel." "Amelia." Her name was a prayer on his lips as he crossed to her and pulled her into his arms. "I love you too, so much it terrifies me. I never thought to feel this way about anyone, but you have become everything to me." Their second kiss was different from all the others, deeper and more urgent, fueled by love and longing finally given permission to flourish. Samuel lifted her in his arms and carried her to the bed, laying her down with exquisite gentleness. What followed was tender and passionate, awkward in moments as all first times are, but ultimately beautiful as they came together as husband and wife in truth. Afterward, lying in Samuel's arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady thump of his heartbeat, Amelia felt a peace she had never known before. This was where she belonged. Not in Boston, not even in the life she would have had with Thomas, but here with Samuel in this place they would build together. "No regrets?" Samuel asked softly, his fingers tracing patterns on her bare shoulder. "None," Amelia assured him. "This feels right, Samuel. Like everything that happened before, all the pain and loss and uncertainty was leading me to exactly where I was meant to be." "I feel the same," Samuel admitted. "I have been carrying such guilt about Thomas, about the argument and the role I played in his death. But loving you, having you here with me, it feels like maybe I am finally moving forward instead of just existing in the shadow of what happened." "Thomas would want that for you," Amelia said firmly. "From everything you have told me about him, he was not the kind of man who would want you to spend your life in penance. He would want you to be happy." "I am happy," Samuel said, wonder in his voice. For the first time since the accident, I am truly happy." The months that followed were the happiest of Amelia's life. She and Samuel settled into true partnership, working together to manage the ranch and build their future. She learned to ride well enough to accompany him on his rounds, checking on the cattle and surveying their land. He taught her to recognize the signs of weather changes and animal illness, included her in decisions about when to sell cattle and what improvements to make to the ranch. In November, they traveled to Santa Fe for supplies and to visit the territorial land office. Samuel surprised her by purchasing an adjacent parcel of land that had come available, expanding the ranch significantly. "For our children," he explained when she questioned the expense. "So they will each have enough land to make their own way, whether they choose to ranch or pursue other dreams." The mention of children made Amelia's heart skip. She had been suspecting for several weeks that she might be pregnant, though she had not yet shared her suspicions with Samuel. That night, in the hotel room they rented in Santa Fe, she finally told him. "I believe I am with child," she said quietly. "It is early yet, but the signs are there." Samuel's reaction was everything she could have hoped for. He swept her into his arms with a whoop of joy, spinning her around until she laughed and begged him to stop before he made her dizzy. "A baby," he breathed, his hand coming to rest on her still flat stomach. "Our baby, Amelia, I can hardly believe it. Are you happy?" she asked, though his reaction made the question unnecessary. "Happy does not begin to cover what I feel right now." Samuel kissed her deeply. "You have given me so much, Amelia. A home, love, and now a family. I could not ask for anything more." The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the winter months. Samuel became even more protective, insisting she avoid heavy work and rest frequently. Maria was delighted by the news and took over even more of the household tasks, clucking over Amelia like a mother hen. In March of 1879, during a late winter storm that blew down from the mountains, Amelia went into labor. The roads were too dangerous to fetch the doctor from town, but Maria and another ranch wife named Sarah Collins attended the birth, their experienced hands guiding Amelia through the long hours of labor. Samuel paced the hallway outside their bedroom, his anxiety palpable. When the baby's first cry finally pierced the air, he burst through the door despite Maria's protests that he should wait. "A son," Amelia said tiredly, smiling up at him from the bed. "We have a son, Samuel." Samuel approached the bed with reverence, staring down at the tiny red-faced infant in Amelia's arms. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Absolutely perfect. I would like to name him Thomas," Amelia said. "After your brother, if that is acceptable to you." Tears spilled down Samuel's cheeks. "Thomas Samuel Randall." "Yes, that is perfect, Amelia. Thank you." Little Thomas proved to be a healthy, vigorous baby who thrived in the ranch environment. Samuel was a devoted father, sneaking into the nursery at odd hours just to watch his son sleep, carrying him around in the crook of his arm while he did chores, talking to him constantly as if the infant could understand every word. "You are going to spoil him," Amelia teased one evening, watching Samuel rock their son to sleep. "Impossible," Samuel replied. "A child cannot receive too much love." Life on the ranch fell into new rhythms organized around the baby's needs. Amelia discovered reserves of strength she had not known she possessed, managing both household and motherhood with increasing confidence. Samuel hired an additional ranch hand so he could spend more time close to the house, unwilling to miss any moment of his son's development. When Thomas was 6 months old, they took him to town for the first time for a church baptism. The entire community turned out to celebrate, bringing gifts and congratulations. Several of the older women commented that Amelia had married well, that Samuel Randall was a good man who would provide for his family. "You are happy, yes?" Maria asked Amelia one afternoon when they were working together in the kitchen while Thomas napped. "The Señor treats you well." "I am happier than I ever imagined possible," Amelia replied honestly. "When I first came to Las Lunas, I was so frightened and uncertain. I thought my life was over, but it was actually just beginning." "God works in mysterious ways," Maria said with satisfaction. "Brings you here for one brother, gives you another. This is his plan, yes." "Yes," Amelia agreed. "I believe it was." That summer the ranch prospered. The cattle were healthy, the grass grew lush from good rains, and Samuel was able to hire 2 more ranch hands to manage the expanded herd. He began talking about the future, about eventually breeding horses in addition to cattle, about building a larger barn and maybe even adding on to the house. "We will need more space if we are to have more children," he said one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Thomas asleep in Amelia's arms. "More children?" Amelia raised an eyebrow. "And how many are you envisioning exactly?" "As many as you are willing to give me," Samuel replied, his eyes warm. "But only if you want them too, Amelia. I would never pressure you." "I would like more children," Amelia admitted. "Perhaps not immediately, as Thomas still keeps me quite busy, but eventually, yes. I want brothers and sisters for him, a house full of life and laughter." "Then that is what we will have," Samuel promised, leaning over to kiss her gently. True to his word, Samuel expanded the house the following spring, adding 2 more bedrooms and a larger parlor. Pete Watson, who had become a trusted friend as well as foreman, helped with the construction, along with several men from town. The work was completed just in time, as Amelia discovered she was pregnant again in June. Their daughter was born in February of 1881, a tiny, perfect creature with Samuel's green eyes and Amelia's dark hair. They named her Anna Margaret, and Samuel was completely besotted with her from the first moment. "I never knew I could love something so small so much," he marveled, holding Anna with the same careful reverence he had shown Thomas. With 2 young children, the ranch was busier than ever. Amelia had help now, not just from Maria, but from a young Mexican girl named Rosa, who came to assist with the children and lighter housework. This freed Amelia to take on more responsibility for the ranch's financial management, keeping the books and handling correspondence with buyers. Thomas grew into a sturdy, curious boy who followed his father everywhere, already showing signs of inheriting Samuel's love for the land and animals. Anna was quieter, content to sit with her mother and watch the world with her serious green eyes. In the spring of 1882, Samuel took Amelia to see Thomas's grave for the first time since their marriage. It was on a hill overlooking the ranch, marked by a simple wooden cross that Samuel had carved himself. Wildflowers grew thick around it, a natural memorial that seemed fitting for a man who had loved this land. "I come here sometimes," Samuel said quietly as they stood looking at the grave, "to talk to him, tell him about the ranch and you and the children. I like to think he knows somehow that we are happy." Amelia took his hand, squeezing gently. "I am certain he knows, and I am certain he is glad that you found happiness, Samuel, that we found it together." "I used to feel so guilty," Samuel admitted. "Guilty for being alive when he was dead, guilty for loving you when you were meant to be his wife, guilty for being happy when he never got that chance. But I have realized something over these past years." "What is that?" "The best way to honor Thomas is not to spend my life in regret, but to live fully and joyfully, to build the kind of life he dreamed of, and to raise our children to appreciate what he and I worked so hard to create. Every day that I am happy with you, every moment I spend with our children on this land, that is honoring his memory." That is beautiful, Samuel, and absolutely true. Amelia leaned her head against his shoulder. I wish I could have known him. But I am grateful beyond words that his death brought me to you. Is that terrible to say? No, Samuel replied, because I feel the same. I miss him every day, but I cannot regret how things turned out, not when it gave me you and our children and this life we have built. They stood together in silence for several minutes, paying their respects. Then Samuel bent and placed a handful of wildflowers on the grave. Thank you, brother, he said softly, for bringing her to me. As they walked back down the hill toward the ranch house, where Maria was watching the children, Amelia reflected on the strange path that had led her here. She had boarded that stage in Santa Fe nearly 4 years ago as a woman without hope, traveling to marry a man she had never met. And through tragedy and chance and the unexpected kindness of a grieving man, she had found a love deeper than anything she could have imagined. The years continued to pass in a rhythm of seasons and growth. Thomas and Anna were joined by another son, David, in 1883, and then a second daughter, Elizabeth, in 1885. The house rang with the sounds of children playing, and the ranch continued to prosper under Samuel's careful management and Amelia's keen business sense. Pete Watson eventually married Maria, a development that delighted everyone and further cemented the bonds that held their small community together. Rosa grew into a capable young woman who managed the household with skill while pursuing her own dream of becoming a teacher, studying from Amelia's books in her spare time. In 1886, Las Lunas got its first proper school, a one-room building that served all the children in the area. Thomas, now 7 years old, began attending, riding to town with his father several days a week. The school's establishment marked the area's transition from raw frontier to established community, a change that brought both benefits and challenges. The railroad came through in 1887, making transportation of cattle to market much easier and opening new opportunities for trade. Samuel was elected to the town council, a position he accepted with reluctance, but fulfilled with characteristic dedication. Amelia found herself taking on informal leadership among the ranch wives, organizing social events, and helping new arrivals adjust to life in New Mexico territory. Through it all, their love only deepened. Samuel remained the devoted husband he had promised to be on that long-ago day when he proposed marriage to honor his brother. But it was so much more than obligation now. They were partners in every sense, united in their love for each other and for the family they had created. On their 10th wedding anniversary in August of 1888, Samuel surprised Amelia with a trip to Santa Fe, leaving the children in the capable hands of Maria and Pete. They stayed in the finest hotel, dined at elegant restaurants, and attended a theatrical performance that left Amelia breathless with delight. "This is wonderful," she said as they walked through the plaza in the evening, the lanterns creating pools of golden light. "But I confess I am eager to get back to the ranch, to our children and our life." "That is how I feel too," Samuel admitted. "I love you more than anything in this world, Amelia, but I also love the life we have built together, the family and the ranch and the community. It is all woven together, inseparable." "We have been blessed," Amelia agreed. "When I think back to that frightened girl who stepped off the stage in Las Lunas 10 years ago, I can hardly believe how far we have come." "She was not just frightened," Samuel corrected gently. "She was also brave and determined and willing to take a chance on an impossible situation. Those qualities have not changed, Amelia. They are still in you, along with all the other things I love about you." They stopped in a quiet corner of the plaza, and Samuel pulled her close, kissing her under the stars as they had done countless times over the years. The kiss still made Amelia's heart race, still filled her with the same rush of love and desire as those first tentative kisses so many years ago. "Come," Samuel said, taking her hand. "Let us return to our room. I have more ways I wish to celebrate our anniversary." The passion between them had not dimmed with time and the demands of parenthood. If anything, it had grown stronger, deepened by trust and knowledge and genuine affection. They made love that night with the ease of long familiarity, but also with the spark of continued attraction. Two people who still found joy and pleasure in each other after a decade together. The next morning, they began the journey home, both eager to see their children and return to the familiar rhythms of ranch life. As the wagon crested the rise that gave the first view of the ranch, Amelia felt her heart swell with contentment. There was the house, enlarged now to accommodate their growing family. There was the barn and the corrals, the cattle grazing in the meadow, the cottonwoods marking the path of the creek. And there, running down the road to meet them, were Thomas and Anna, whooping with excitement at their parents' return. "Papa! Mama!" Thomas shouted, his face alight with joy. Samuel pulled the wagon to a stop and jumped down, scooping up both children and swinging them in circles while they shrieked with laughter. Amelia climbed down more sedately and found herself immediately surrounded, David and Elizabeth toddling out from the house with Maria following close behind. "Did you miss us?" Amelia asked, gathering her younger children into her arms. "So much," Anna declared. "Tell us everything about Santa Fe. Did you see the governor's palace?" "Did you buy us presents?" "We did," Samuel confirmed, reaching into the wagon to pull out a bundle. "But first, tell us what you have been doing while we were gone. Have you been good for Maria and Pete?" As the children chattered about their activities, competing for attention and showing off accomplishments, Amelia caught Samuel's eye over their heads. He smiled at her, that warm, loving smile that still had the power to make her breath catch, and mouthed, "I love you." "I love you too," she mouthed back, then turned her attention to Anna's excited description of a new foal that had been born while they were gone. That evening, after the children were finally settled in bed and the house was quiet, Amelia and Samuel sat on the porch as they did most nights, watching the sun set over their land. Samuel had his arm around her shoulders, and Amelia leaned into his warmth, perfectly content. "Do you ever think about how different things could have been?" Samuel asked suddenly. "If Thomas had not died, if you had married him instead of me?" "Sometimes," Amelia admitted, "but not with regret. I believe I would have been happy with Thomas. From his letters and what you have told me about him, he was a good man who would have been a kind husband. But I do not believe I would have loved him the way I love you, Samuel. What we have is special, born out of tragedy but grown into something beautiful and strong." "I feel the same," Samuel said. "Thomas was my brother and I loved him dearly. But you are my soulmate, Amelia, the other half of my heart. I cannot imagine my life without you now." "You will never have to," Amelia promised. "I am yours for all our days, Samuel Randall. Nothing will change that." The years continued their steady march forward. The children grew and thrived, each developing their own personalities and interests. Thomas proved to have his father's gift for ranching, happiest when he was outside working with the animals or helping with the endless tasks that kept the ranch running. Anna showed academic promise, devouring books and asking questions that challenged even Amelia's education. David was the adventurer, always exploring the farthest corners of the ranch and coming home with scraped knees and wild stories. And Elizabeth, the baby, was gentle and artistic, spending hours drawing pictures of the landscape and animals around her. In 1890, when Amelia was 35, she discovered she was pregnant again, a surprise as they had assumed their family was complete. Samuel was delighted, though also concerned about Amelia's health, as she was older now than she had been with previous pregnancies. "Women have babies in their 30s all the time," Amelia assured him. "I am healthy and strong. There is no reason to worry." The pregnancy was more difficult than her previous ones, with periods of fatigue and illness that kept her resting more than she liked. But in March of 1891, she delivered a healthy son they named Peter, after Pete Watson, who had become like family to them over the years. Peter was their last child, and Samuel doted on him with the particular tenderness reserved for the baby of the family. Little Peter had Samuel's green eyes and Amelia's gentle temperament, a sweet-natured child who seemed to bring sunshine into every room he entered. As the 1890s progressed, New Mexico territory continued to evolve. Talk of statehood grew louder, though it would be many more years before that dream became reality. The Randall Ranch became one of the most successful operations in the area, known for quality cattle and Samuel's fair dealing. Thomas, now a young man of 18, took on increasing responsibility for the ranch, showing the same dedication and skill his father and uncle had demonstrated. In 1896, Las Lunas celebrated its 50th anniversary as a formal settlement. A grand festival was organized, and Samuel and Amelia hosted a barbecue at the ranch for all their friends and neighbors. Nearly 100 people came, filling the yard with laughter and music and celebration. As Amelia moved through the crowd, making sure everyone had enough to eat and drink, she marveled at how integrated she had become in this community. These people were her friends, her family in all but blood. She had built a life here that she never could have imagined back in Boston, a life of purpose and love and belonging. "Mother, you should rest," Anna said, appearing at her elbow. At 15, Anna was turning into a beautiful young woman, though Amelia thought she was still too young to be attracting the attention of several boys in town. "You have been on your feet all day." "I am fine, sweetheart, but perhaps you could check on your younger siblings." "Make sure David is not getting into mischief," Anna laughed. "David is always getting into mischief, but I will corral him before he causes any serious trouble." As Anna moved off on her errand, Samuel appeared, slipping his arm around Amelia's waist. "Everything all right?" "Everything is perfect," Amelia replied, leaning into him. "Look at all of this, Samuel. The ranch, our children, our friends, this life we have created. It is more than I ever dared to dream." "We have been fortunate," Samuel agreed, "and blessed. I wake up every morning grateful for you, Amelia, for the chance I was given to love you and build this life together." "I feel the same gratitude," Amelia said softly. "I came west as a bride for your brother, expecting one kind of life. And instead, I found you, and a life far richer than anything I could have imagined. Thomas gave me that in a way. By dying, he brought us together." "He would be happy, I think," Samuel mused, "to know that his death led to something good rather than just tragedy, that his sacrifice, in a sense, created this family and this life." "I believe you are right," Amelia said. "And I hope he knows, wherever he is, that we have honored his memory by living fully and loving deeply." They stood together watching their children play with the other young people, watching their friends and neighbors enjoy the celebration, watching the sun begin its descent toward the western mountains. This was their kingdom, this ranch and this community, built through hard work and sustained by love. As the years rolled on into the new century, the Randall family continued to flourish. Thomas married in 1900, wedding a sweet girl from Santa Fe named Catherine, and they built a house on the northern section of the ranch. Samuel deeded them enough land to start their own operation, while remaining part of the larger Randall holdings. Their first grandchild, a boy named Samuel Thomas Randall, arrived in 1901, bringing joy that made both Samuel and Amelia feel ancient and young at the same time. Anna married in 1903, choosing a school teacher from Albuquerque who appreciated her intelligence and supported her desire to continue her own education. David eventually became a surveyor, traveling throughout the territory, but always returning home to the ranch he loved. Elizabeth showed real artistic talent and went east for training, though she too eventually returned to New Mexico, unable to stay away from the landscape that inspired her work. And little Peter, true to his gentle nature, became a doctor, establishing a practice in Las Lunas that served the entire community. Through all the changes and growth, through the joys of grandchildren and the sorrows of friends lost to age and illness, Samuel and Amelia remained the center around which everything revolved. Their love was a constant, a foundation upon which the entire family was built. In 1908, on their 30th wedding anniversary, Samuel took Amelia back to the spot where he had first brought her to see the ranch, back when she was still deciding whether to accept his proposal. They were both graying now, with lines earned by years of hard work and laughter, but their love had not diminished. "You remember that day?" Samuel asked, his arm around her as they looked out over the valley. "When I showed you the house and asked you to marry me?" "I remember everything about it," Amelia replied. "How frightened I was, how uncertain, but also how I felt something shift inside me when you made your offer. Hope, I think. The first real hope I had felt since leaving Boston." "You gave me hope too," Samuel said. "I was drowning in guilt and grief, barely functioning. And then you arrived, this remarkable woman who somehow agreed to marry me despite having every reason to refuse. You saved me, Amelia. In every way a person can be saved." "We saved each other," Amelia corrected gently. "You gave me a home and security and eventually love. I gave you a reason to move forward, to forgive yourself and embrace life again. We were both broken in different ways, and somehow we fit together perfectly." 30 years, Samuel marveled. 30 years, 5 children, more grandchildren than I can count. We have built something remarkable, you and I. "We have," Amelia agreed. "And I would not change a single moment of it, Samuel. Even the hard times, even the losses, they all led us here. To this place, this life, this love." Samuel turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. Despite the decades between them and that first kiss, Amelia's heart still fluttered when he looked at her with such intensity. "I loved my brother," Samuel said seriously, "and I will always regret the circumstances of his death. But I cannot regret that it brought you to me, Amelia. You are the love of my life, the greatest blessing I have ever received. And I promise you, for whatever years we have left, I will cherish you always, just as I have from the beginning." Tears streamed down Amelia's face as she reached up to cup his weathered cheek. "I love you, Samuel Randall. Today, tomorrow, and for all the rest of our days. You honored your brother by cherishing me, and in doing so, you gave me a life beyond my wildest dreams." Their kiss was tender and deep, a renewal of vows made 30 years ago but strengthened by everything they had experienced together. When they finally parted, both were smiling through their tears. "Come," Samuel said, taking her hand. "Let us go home. Our family will be arriving soon for the anniversary dinner, and I want a few moments alone with my wife before the chaos begins." As they walked back to the wagon, Amelia looked back one last time at the vista spread before them. The ranch had grown so much since that first day, expanded by hard work and good fortune into one of the finest operations in the territory. But more important than the land or the cattle or the prosperity was what had been built within the walls of that adobe house, within the hearts of the family that called it home. Love, trust, partnership, legacy. These were the true measures of their success, the real wealth they had accumulated over 30 years of marriage. And as they drove back to the ranch house, where their children and grandchildren would soon gather to celebrate, Amelia knew with absolute certainty that she was the richest woman alive. The anniversary dinner was a joyous affair, with 3 generations of Randalls crowded around the extended table that Samuel and Thomas had built specifically for such occasions. There was laughter and storytelling, with the grandchildren begging for tales of the old days when Las Lunas was still rough frontier and their grandparents were young. "Tell us about how you met," young Samuel Thomas begged, his eyes bright with curiosity. Samuel and Amelia exchanged glances, a lifetime of understanding passing between them in that single look. "It is a long story," Samuel began. "And a good one," Amelia added. "We have time," Anna said, her own children clustered around her. "Please tell us." "We have heard bits and pieces, but never the whole story." So Samuel and Amelia told them, trading the narrative back and forth, filling in details for each other, painting a picture of that long-ago summer when everything changed. They told them about Thomas, about his dreams and plans, about the tragedy that cut his life short. They told them about the difficult decision Amelia faced and the unconventional proposal Samuel made. They told them about learning to love each other, about building trust and partnership, and eventually a deep and abiding romance that had sustained them through 3 decades. So grandmother came to marry Uncle Thomas, but married grandfather instead. Elizabeth's oldest daughter asked, trying to work out the complicated relationships. "That is right," Amelia confirmed. "I came west to marry a man I had never met, and instead I married his brother. It was not what I expected, but it was what I needed, what we both needed." "And you lived happily ever after," young Peter said, at 8 years old, still young enough to believe in fairy tales. "We did," Samuel said, reaching across the table to take Amelia's hand. "We truly did." As the evening wore on and the younger children began to droop with exhaustion, the party slowly dispersed. Thomas and Catherine gathered their brood and headed back to their house. Anna and her husband departed for town, along with David and his wife. Elizabeth and Peter, both still unmarried and living nearby, helped clean up before heading to their own residences. Finally, Samuel and Amelia were alone once more, standing on their porch and watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky. The night was cool and clear, perfect, with a breeze that carried the scent of sage and grass. "Tired?" Samuel asked. "Pleasantly exhausted," Amelia replied. "It was a wonderful evening. Our family has grown so much, Samuel. Sometimes I can hardly believe all these people came from the 2 of us." 5 children, 12 grandchildren so far, and probably more to come, Samuel said with pride. "We have created quite a legacy." "The best kind of legacy," Amelia agreed. "Not just children, but good people who love each other and this land, people who will carry forward what we have built here." They stood in comfortable silence for several minutes, as they had done countless times over the decades. These moments of quiet connection had always been precious to them, a chance to simply be together without words or activity. "Amelia," Samuel said eventually, his voice thoughtful, "if you could go back and change things, would you? If you could have arrived in Las Lunas and found Thomas alive, married him as you planned, would you choose that instead of what we have had?" Amelia turned to face him fully, wanting him to see the absolute truth in her eyes. "Not for anything in this world," she said firmly. "I would not change a single moment, Samuel. Yes, I wish Thomas had lived. I wish he could have found his own happiness, had his own family, seen what we have built here. But I do not wish I had married him instead of you. What we have is precious beyond measure. It is exactly what was meant to be." Relief and love washed over Samuel's face. "I needed to hear that. After 30 years, I still sometimes wonder if you have regrets." "Never," Amelia said fiercely. "You have been the love of my life, Samuel Randall. My partner, my best friend, the father of my children and the keeper of my heart. I loved you when we married, though I did not fully understand it yet. I loved you when we became true husband and wife. And I love you now, perhaps more than ever, because I know exactly what a gift our love is. Some people search their entire lives and never find what we have." Samuel pulled her close, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "I love you too, Amelia, more than words can express. You are my everything." They held each other under the stars. Two people who had found each other through tragedy and built something beautiful from the wreckage of lost dreams. Around them, the ranch settled into night, the cattle lowing softly in the distance, the wind whispering through the cottonwoods, the house that had witnessed so much love and life standing solid behind them. This was their home, their haven, the place where they had raised their family and grown old together. And as they finally went inside, Samuel's arm around Amelia's waist, both knew with certainty that they would continue to face whatever years remained together, side by side, as they always had been. The story that began with death and duty had transformed into the greatest love story either of them could have imagined. Samuel had honored his brother by cherishing Amelia, and in doing so, had found his own path to healing and happiness. And Amelia, who had arrived in Las Lunas as a frightened bride with nowhere else to turn, had discovered not just security and safety, but true love and a family that would endure for generations. As they prepared for bed that night, moving through the familiar rhythms of 30 years of shared routines, Amelia caught sight of their reflection in the mirror. Two people no longer young, marked by age and work, but still clearly in love. Samuel came up behind her and wrapped his arms around her waist, resting his chin on her shoulder so they were both looking at their reflection. "We have had a good life," he said softly. "The best life," Amelia corrected, leaning back into his embrace. "And it is not over yet. We have more years ahead of us, more grandchildren to spoil, more sunsets to watch together." "I look forward to every single one," Samuel said, pressing a kiss to her temple. They climbed into bed, the same bed they had shared for 3 decades, and Samuel pulled Amelia close. She settled against him with the ease of long habit, her head on his shoulder, her hand over his heart. "Good night, my love," Samuel whispered into the darkness. "Good night," Amelia replied. I love you too, always." As sleep claimed them both, the stars wheeled overhead, and the ranch lay quiet under the vast New Mexico sky. Inside the house, two hearts beat in synchrony, two lives completely intertwined, two souls that had found each other against all odds and built something that would last far beyond their own years. The story of Samuel and Amelia Randall would be told by their descendants for generations, a tale of honor and duty transformed into the deepest love. They had started as strangers bound by obligation, but they had become something far greater: partners, lovers, best friends, soulmates. And they had indeed lived happily ever after, every single day, cherishing each other always, just as Samuel had promised on that long-ago day when he asked a heartbroken young woman to take a chance on an impossible situation. It had been impossible, until suddenly it was not. Until it became the most natural, most right thing in the world. Their love story was complete, fully lived, deeply felt, and absolutely real. And that was the greatest gift of all.